Hey guys, for today's video, we're going to be doing a tint back. So we're going to be filling this platinum blonde and taking her back to her natural color, but still giving her tons of dimension and lots of brightness. I've been loving all the messages I've gotten on Instagram, so you can follow me there if you'd like at Christy@thecottage.
Okay, so my client that I'm doing right now, she just had a baby like 6 months ago and she probably has a good 3 inches or so of grow out. Her hair is like a solid line of like platinum blonde with like roots that are kind of my color. And she's thinking that she kind of wants to tone down her blonde and do more of like a balayage or have it look a little bit softer. And I told her that I wouldn't go too dark because chances are if you've been blonde for this long, you're probably going to want to go blonde again eventually as your daughter gets older. So right now we're just going to try and blend her roots with a little bit of a partial foil, brighten her up around her face, and then we're going to add some dimension back into her blonde. And I told her that it's going to have to be like a warmer tone just because we have to fill the hair. So the darker color that we do, she wants to stay as close to her roots as possible, which is like a level 7, so like 6, 7. So we're gonna have to add that warmth back in there to help it grab in the hair and fill the hair as we go darker. So that's the service we're gonna be doing today.
Here's her hair grown out. You can see how blonde she's used to being, super bright, even though it's pretty yellow. She definitely is used to being really bright and blonde. So to start, we're going to go through and do a partial foil. Even though we're trying to do a tint back, I still suggested going through and breaking her base a little bit. That way it will help the color blend. I felt like even though we're trying to go darker, I don't think it's a good idea to go solid dark or as dark all over as her natural, even though her natural color isn't really that dark. Because she's used to being so blonde, no matter what we do, even if it's just like a few shades darker, she's still gonna feel really, really dark. So one thing when somebody goes back from being blonde, you really need to make sure that you take into consideration that they're gonna feel like they're almost like dark brown. So just be very cautious when you're doing these services, because I still told her I think it's important that even though we're wanting to be more natural, we really need to make sure that you feel bright around your face, because that's what she's used to seeing. So if we just did a whole bunch of dark all over, like, she's gonna feel like she has just a drab color with her natural roots. Her ends are just gonna feel kind of muddy. So I told her that to help blend her roots through her ends, it's not like she's gonna really see any highlights necessarily because we're gonna cover them back up with the root shadow. But I told her that it would be a good idea just to get a little bit of dimension in her root area, just to kind of break it up a little bit so it's not so solid dark. And then that will also help minimize the line of demarcation from where her grow out is. So right now we're gonna go through and we're gonna do her hairline foils and do a pretty strong money piece. However, we're gonna do it so that it's blended but bright enough so that she still feels like she's nice and bright right around her face, but it's not going to be like huge, chunky, super solid or anything. So that way it will still kind of grow out a little bit softer over the next few months, and she won't feel like, oh my god, my hair has this horrible grow out that she was trying to prevent from happening. So if anything, she'll just have to come in for maybe like a touch up around her hairline if that's what she wants to do. So for her money piece, we're doing roughly 3 to 4 back-to-back weaves. And this is going to keep her nice and bright from what she's used to. And then we're going to go through and do a partial foil. But with the foil, we're not doing it so that we necessarily brighten her roots up. We just want to kind of blend her roots a little bit more. So we're just going to go through and do a very fine weave of baby lights just in the top crown area to try and blend her roots. Also, before I forget to mention, I'm using Schwarzkopf Blonde Me Lightener with 20 volume and Olaplex, which is generally the same bleach and volume that I use for all of my services. And because we're working our way so much further onto the other side, we're really just going to pop 1 or 2 in over here and then just throw 1 or 2 across the back just to make sure that we take care of that area. And then we will let that process and move on to trying to fill her ends. And here she is, just a really quick partial foil just right at the top.
Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do next is go mix up like a darker, not like super dark, but a little bit lighter than your natural color of like a warmer, I don't want to say copper, but kind of a little bit, like a neutral warm shade. We're gonna go through and like bring it through some of the ends of your hair. And then just for some like dimensional pieces. And then we're gonna let that sit. And then when we go back through, we're going to, like when we wash your hair and tone it for the blonde, we're gonna go through and do like kind of tone down all of it and like drag it through the ends more. That way because that picture that you showed me is kind of like a little bit more of a dimensional, like not just one solid color, it kind of had different tones. So I think if we add that, like go through right now with like the warm neutral shade, it's gonna help the other color that we go back over, it's gonna help it hold more, and then it will kind of add like some different tones to it. So, and I think having it sit for as long as your hair processes will be good too. Okay. So, okay, I'm gonna go mix for that. Okay, so my client is going darker and adding more depth into her hair, and she had a baby and she kind of wants to go a little bit more natural, but she wants to still, you know, be a blonde, just add some more of her natural and some dimension. So we're gonna go through with 8WN from Color Sync, and we're going to just paint through some areas and fill her ends. I'm not gonna go into her natural, just where the line of demarcation is, and just kind of weave some pieces just to kind of like blend that color down a little bit.
Okay, I figure somebody might ask, so I just kind of want to talk about it right now. So the reason why I'm just going to go through with some packets and fill her ends is because I don't know if you noticed when I was putting those foils in the very back of her hair, but her hair already kind of naturally grows out really softly underneath, and it's really just this top section where she has like a really heavy solid blonde. So I feel almost like she's probably done like a full foil, and then she's probably done like maybe 2 or 3 partial foils since her last full foil, and that's how long it's grown out in the ends or underneath anyways. So I felt like we didn't really need to do that much to the underneath, and I want her to have the option of going blonder eventually whenever she wants to. So I feel like toning her hair down altogether would be like probably not the best idea, because let's be honest, like blondes always want to be blonde, and if they go back darker, like eventually they're gonna want to go brighter again. So I feel like planning for the future while doing someone's hair for what they want right now is always the best way to approach things, because you don't want to set yourself up for something that they're not going to be able to have in the future, when you, like, we already know that that's what they're going to want. So I told her that we're just going to go through and kind of weave these sections in between her blonde just to add this darker in there. So we're going to fill some of her ends, not a whole bunch, just enough to kind of like break up this top section where it's just so solid blonde and super bright. And then after this fills, I'm going to go through with the shadow root and do like a level 7-ish, like at her roots, and kind of like comb it and swipe it through the ends. But because of seeing how much it already blends pretty nicely in the underneath area of her hair, I feel like she kind of could get away with like a ombre balayage type of color. So that way she still feels like she's gonna have that nice brightness like around the front of her face and then through her ends. So that's why we're just gonna go through and do a few foils versus like coloring all of her hair darker and filling it all over the place. And because her hair is pretty yellow, I do want to kind of adjust the tone of her blonde. So we're going to go through half and half with this formulation and kind of soften her blonde up a little bit. All right, now that we have added that depth back in and kind of filled her hair with the 8 warm neutral from Color Sync, we're gonna go through with the Schwarzkopf and just do like a 7, just kind of bring it through her midsection and her roots just to kind of blend it, and the highlights will still show through a little bit. It's not going to cover it totally, but it will just break up her root area just to have a little bit of dimension. We're going to keep her blonde area still nice and bright, like right up around the front of the face. And depending on how her hair is naturally drying, if I feel like we need to go through and just brighten up some of the ends a little bit, then we'll just paint through just here and there. Her hair was still pretty warm, not super bright of a blonde color. So if I feel like we need to just brighten her ends a little bit, we will, but that's not necessarily what we're gonna end up doing. By the way, I didn't show it, but I did end up adding a little bit of the 612 to add a little bit of ash to try and cool it down just a little bit more. Okay, so for this root shadow that we are going to blend into her color, we are going to paint it pretty right on her head, like all the way down to the line of demarcation. And then once we hit that line of demarcation, we're just going to kind of swipe it a little bit down below there just to softly blend it, and then comb it through the ends. That way it kind of gets everywhere, but it still kind of softens it as it flows down through her ends a little bit more. And you can see also where we highlighted her hair, it's just super soft. It's not too bright or anything. And adding this root shadow is just going to give it a really soft tone without feeling like she has these super dark, harsh roots. I should have talked about this earlier, but the reason that I wanted to go through with an 8WN is because we need to fill her hair when we're going darker, or else if we just put like a 7, like her natural color, back on her hair potentially will look muddy because there's just nothing there for her color to hold on to. So when you go back through and you're going to fill somebody's hair, you have to put that warmth back in there, because that's what the underlying pigment that their hair normally has, that's what they're missing. So we have to add that back in there as we're going darker. So the reason why I chose a level 8 is because we have to add that warmth, but I don't necessarily want to keep it super warm. I want it to be cooled down. And I did explain to her that I have to go through with like a warm neutral color, and not to be opposed to having warmer tones in her hair, just because that's what her hair naturally will need to tone it back down. So make sure when you do the service, just tell your client and let them know, like, you really don't have a say in this. Like, we have to add warm back in your hair. And if you are so against having warmth in your hair, like, we can try to tone it down as much as possible, but you are going to have warmer tones in there, and there's like really no way that you can go against it. So I did a level 8. That way, when I'm going through right now with a level 7, even like if you add a little bit of a level 6 to it, at least it will kind of neutralize that warmth of the level 8 and grab a little bit darker of more of a neutral tone, and just kind of, it's not going to cool down a whole bunch, but at least it won't be super copper. It will just kind of be more of like a natural shade now. So that's why I chose to do a level 8 and then tone down on top of that with a level 7. Also, as I'm doing her hairline right now, I'm barely tapping right around her hairline, and then I'm not going to comb through the ends, just because this right here is where we want to try and preserve as much brightness as possible. So just right at the front of the hairline, I'm just going to tap it and then kind of set it aside. That way it doesn't comb through with the rest of the hair until maybe the very last few minutes, just to see that it will blend a little bit softer. But we do want to try to keep this as bright as possible. And I always like taking sections of the hair and painting the root shadow and just kind of like swiping some ribbons of dark throughout the hair. That way it kind of has a little bit more dimension. So we're just going to kind of swipe through the ends, then comb through to make sure everything blends really nicely. So I wanted you to be able to see the hair as we're blow drying it, and that it's a little bit more straight, because let's be honest, anything can look good when you throw some curls in it. So you can see here how blended it is, how much the highlights through the top just kind of soften it a little bit, and it just blends really nicely through the ends, and she still has that brightness right along the face. So here it is straight.
Wow. It's really good.
So it blends really nicely, so there's nowhere that you should feel like...
I love it.
And
it's darker.
Yeah, it is. And it will lighten up over time, and it is a little warm, but it's not like super, it's not like obviously warm. And I did go back over with that last color with a ash, just to cool it down a little bit. So it blends with your roots nicely. You are going to lighten up. You will notice over time that you do, like if you kind of look, you'll see that there are the teeniest little highlights through your roots, just to kind of break it up a little bit. So, and then yeah, still nice and bright through the front. So yeah, turned out good. I was really worried. I was like, I don't know. You never know if it's going to grab too. Okay, so I don't know if you guys caught that or not, but did you hear her say, it's so much darker? So that is why it's so good to make sure when you're tinting back someone's hair to their natural, that you try to leave as much brightness around the face, or just do a little bit of a muddy piece, and try to like leave as much dimensional blonde pieces as you can, just because she is going to feel so much darker, even though it's really not that much darker. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and don't forget to like and subscribe.